Okay, I'm here interviewing Bruce Barron. Bruce, when did you first begin coming to the synagogue and why?
Well, my memory is it was sometime in 2005. Jack Rabin was still the president of the synagogue and handling services. And I started coming to the synagogue because my colleague and good friend Elisabeth Ellenbogan needed a ride to the Shul. And I wanted to make sure she had a ride to the Shul. Elizabeth, and I and other people were working at that time together at what was then known as the Department of Public Welfare. And at that time, Jake Zook, who was still alive, was having problems coordinating her transportation. And I would drive her back and forth because I was living in Harrisburg.
How did you find out about B'nai Jacob Synagogue? How did you...
So that was amazing. It was kind of the fortune that it is, I was looking in San Diego, actually. I was looking on a website and I saw many synagogues in the Harrisburg areas, but I was looking for a place in town, in my town. And when I looked online, I saw historical B'nai Jacobs, and I was thinking, historical B'nai Jacob, what does it mean even, So that was one thing. And then my neighbors told me that actually the treasurer of B'nai Jacobs is their friends. And they gave me the phone number and, you gave us an amazing tour and it just came together. I always wanted a place where it's in the neighborhood, and I found it.
Elisabeth, you and your family came to America from Europe after the Holocaust, and you first settled where, in York, was it?
In York in 1957.
Right, and then you came and you started working after you were working a million other jobs, you came to work for what was then called the Department of Public Welfare in Harrisburg, and you were living in Harrisburg for a while. How did it happen that you started to come to B'nai Jacob?
I was going to services in B'nai B'rith. They were informal. Betty Orstein of blessed memory now said, oh, you have to come to our shul. It's just like they were in the old days where you came from. So her cousin Jake, bless his memory, drove us to this synagogue. And I had lived a different life than American Jews. I didn't always feel welcome as a survivor, as a person who didn't necessarily have religious affiliation, and as a person who was registered as evangelical by the German government because they had a slot for it. So I felt welcome, which had not always been the case, and I started to attend on a regular basis. Jake, bless him, drove us, Betty and me, and one day he couldn't, so he asked someone else. Next thing you know, there was this whole system. We got to see to it that Elizabeth doesn't miss services. She can't legally drive. And eventually I simply affiliated with the organization, and it's been my Jewish home ever since.
First time I ever came to B'nai Jacob was actually back in the early 1970s, may have been 1972 or 73, when some of our neighbors who were living in Briarcrest Gardens and Hershey, who were young residents and young faculty at the Hershey Medical Center, said, we're meeting regularly for a Havurah at B'nai Jacob. And they were young families. Our kids were together. We had just come to Harrisburg, and we thought that would be wonderful. And so we brought the kids over, and we're delighted that the services were being provided by Hershey Medical Center faculty who were interacting with the kids, and it was just delightful. And Abe Singer and Jake Zook were there, and they welcomed us with open arms, always glad to see a new face. And we were frequent attenders of events for many, many years.
Our friends came. They had come here before we did, and we were We belonged to another shul in Harrisburg, and we decided to leave that shul, so we were looking for another one. So they asked us if we wanted to come here, so we did, and we found the people to be very, very friendly. Jake was here. It just felt so welcoming, and that's why we came back.
Do you remember how long ago that was?
Oh gosh, in the 90s, mid-90s.
Because whenever I think Jack became president
Right
shortly after our first visit.
I was in a rabbinical program after college for a year. I had a little bit of training. They had trained me that year to both chauffeur, to lead services for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I knew how to read Torah, and during college I took speech classes. So I was prepared to go nowhere. But that year, unfortunately, Joe Levin, who had led services in Middletown for a number of years, passed away. And it was his yahrzeit right before Rosh Hashanah. And so they found out that I was back in town. And so I led services that year.
Who contacted you to lead service?
Jacob Synagogue asked me, he contacted me at that point.
Today we're here with Brenda and Bailey Imber and their son Jason Imber. Brenda, what is your connection to B'nai Jacob Synagogue? Who were your ancestors that were members?
Okay, I'm going to start with a bunch of names. My grandfather, whom I called Zeta Shmuel, Samuel Prouser, and then my granduncle and grand relatives who went by the name of Zooks, and Zaks, were part of the group who built the shul. And then my cousins Jake and Lena and Mo, Zook and Zak, maintained the shul throughout their lives. And Lena was actually the driving force for getting the shul on the National Historic Registry.
Brenda, can you tell us just a little more about Jake and Lena, what they did for the shul for all those years since their father passed in 1919?
I know that both financially and physically, because Jake and Lena lived so close to the shul, that they were kind of the maybe unofficial or even official gabas for the shul. And I think Jake went there every day. And I know that every time we went to Middletown, we went to Jake and Lena's house. And Jake always, we visited the shul, we visited the mikveh room, we visited, and he really was, even after Lena died, that was his home.
When you came to the synagogue in 1979, do you remember specific people who were in the synagogue at that time?
Jake Zook, certainly. Ambrose Klein, very active. There was a quasi-rabbi that took part. Lou Goldberg was a gentleman's name, yes. Nice man. And then a succession of people who stepped in his shoes, so to speak, to the present time. Larry's brother-in-law comes up from Philadelphia, does a terrific job for us, and I remember that.
Yeah, you were on the board of B'nai Jacob.
I was on the board for quite a while, and I would get phone calls from Ambrose Klein or Jake Zook saying, "You're not going to vote for that communist, are you? You're going to vote for this proposition," as far as the board was concerned. And that type of banter back and forth. So I picked sides based on the issue, and then I thought it was time to have fresh blood take my spot.
And before that, you attended the Steelton Shul.
The Steelton Shul, Tepeth, Israel, closed down in 1952-3. The cornerstone was entrusted to me through Dr. I.O. Silver. After I asked Jake Zook for guidance and permission, and I suggested that cornerstone be put in the basement on the windowsill. And a very short story of a long conversation was Jake said to me, Wojciech, you graduated from high school, right? I said, yes. He said, you went to college? I said, yeah. He said, I understand you went to law school. I said, yes. He said, do you know where cornerstones hang out? I said, on a building. That's right, dummy. He said, we're putting it in the backyard. It has to stay where it went originally, outside. It lasted all these decades and 100 years. It's gone in the backyard. And that's where I think it's still out in the backyard.
Still there, yes,
Yeah.
yes it is.
So, Marlon, when did you first begin coming to services at the synagogue?
Probably in the late 90s. We had a retired Navy captain from Carlisle, Mike Epstein. And he led the services at that particular time. Later, he was replaced by Eric Epstein, who was the president of the synagogue at that particular time. There was a man called
Ambrose.
Yeah. Ambrose Klein. And he was actually, he wrote the history of the synagogue and had it made a historic place. But he was very involved. And I knew Jake Zook at that particular time because he had a brother in Harrisburg, Mo Zook. And Mo Zook had the meat store in Harrisburg, a kosher meat store in Harrisburg. So I knew Jake because of his brother.
Jake Zook was the treasurer and caretaker for the synagogue, the shamus, for 90 years. And I met him in 1987 just by chance. I was on a tour of historical houses in Middletown and other locations that were historic. And I happened to come in here and started talking to Jake. And Jake said, "You're Jewish?" I said, "Well, yeah, but I haven't been in synagogue in 20 years. And he said, "Doesn't matter. We need you for a minute. Can I call you?" He got my phone number. And you know how Jake could be very persuasive. And that's how it all started with Jake. And the rest is history.
You say the rest is history. Even when Jake died, he continued his relationship with you by putting you in charge of a legacy gift he gave to the synagogue. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Jake was, like I said, for 90 years here, and then I took over his positions as he was getting older. In his early 90s, I started handling the treasury duties and the shamus duties, and when Jake passed away, Jake left us in his will 2 houses that he owned next door to each other. And one used to be the Zook family store, the Zach's family store, corner store, and then he lived in it for many years. And then the house next door, they owned both houses. He donated those to the synagogue in his will, and as a legacy, that's basically what the synagogue's been staying alive on those funds for many years now.
Can you identify yourself, please?
Jacob Zook.
And how old are you?
88.
Okay, now your father, Jake, was the first president and one of the founders of B'nai Jacob.
Right.
What are your memories of your parents and your family life?
Well, I remember my father, I used to go along with him. He used to go out in the country and peddle rags, and I'd go along with him, and I'd help him. You know, I was younger, and I used to go out there, and what they used to do, they used to barter, especially on a Thursday. They'd go out to the farmers, and they'd barter for a chicken. They could bring it home Thursday and kill it, get the rabbi here to kill it, then they'd have it for the weekend.
Tell us what the relationship was between Ambrose Klein and Jake Zook, because these are 2 of the major historical figures in the history of our synagogue.
If one could attempt to juxtapose argumentative personalities and love, I think that sums it up. I mean, it's from one extreme to another. They had a lot in common, you know, it was like yin and yang, and neither of them would surrender.
Right, but in terms of the relationship with one another?
I think that they were buddies, but they understood that they didn't agree with each other on certain topics. Yeah.
And they were able to keep the shul alive for
very much so. And I think not everybody, and certainly I think I could, it's fair to include myself, was aware of what they did behind the scenes even when they were arguing for the best interests of the shul. They were really dedicated.
You eventually did get to the United States through Canada, and you ended up in Middletown. And why did you choose B'nai Jacob Synagogue? How did you become a member of the B'nai Jacob Synagogue?
Number one, because I'm a retired professor of Penn State, and I taught in Middletown, at the Middletown campus, the Harrisburg campus.
Mm-hmm.
I was the 13th professor. There were 300 students there. Now there are over 3,000, I think, I'm not sure. So, and then I noticed, and then the people at the campus, my colleagues and students told me. So I got acquainted and found out about Jake and his sister Lena. And then there are two people told me about the synagogue. And I noticed it and I saw how beautiful it is from the outside. And I loved it and I still love it. There's nothing as beautiful in the whole area as the synagogue lit up at night.
We're here with Alfred and Judy Zernick, who traveled from Philadelphia. Judy, you are the granddaughter of one of our founders of the synagogue, Philip Singer.
Yes.
Who was born in Lithuania in 1862. Pappy Singer, as you knew him, married Mary Baker, and they had 5 children, the youngest of which was Abraham Singer, your father. He was president of the synagogue for 27 years, from 1960 to 1987. Can you tell us what you remember of those times?
Well, many, many wonderful memories. But in regard to what you said, I think he always said to me, he passed away when he was 89, but he always said to me, I have never gone to high holiday services any place except B'nai Jacob. From the day he was very, very young, he always, even when they moved to Philadelphia in the 60s for several years, he always came back for the services. He has never attended another synagogue for high services.
Do you remember a guy named Abe Baker?
Yes.
Do you remember Gertrude Singer Nitzberg?
That she is my cousin because her father and my father were brothers. Were of the 5 brothers in Philip Singer's. He had 5 sons.
The 10 Commandments up there with the lions guarding the 10 Commandments, Abe Baker did that by hand.
I did not know that.
So I was told that story.
Isn't that something?
He did that by hand, and he's kind of an interesting guy from what I understand. So moving on, we're going to move on. The basement floor was recently permanently repaired at great cost. The social hall was renamed after your family as a Singer Family Social Hall, thanks to your very generous donation towards the project. Your family was such a great part of the synagogue for many years. This must have been very important to you to maintain their legacy.
Oh, yes. And I still feel, it will never end. We have such a unique history here. Mm-hmm. And I am so proud of it. And as I said, I would not go anyplace else either.
Oh, the social hall that you did such a nice job on, that used to be the mikveh.
Okay.
Many, many, many years ago. I don't know when they actually closed it, but I know that it was always, we always referred to it as mikveh. It's the purification bath for the women.
Okay, and part of the social hall back then was also a cheder, right? Which is where they teach the kids to read Hebrew.
Yeah, after they closed it after it was no longer a mikveh, they converted it to social hall. Yeah.
Okay.
Roxanne, can you tell us a little about your grandfather, Samuel Payne, who was one of the founders and a charter member of B'nai Jacob Synagogue? When did he come to America? How many children did he have? Anything you remember about him?
Well, he was a very quiet man. I do remember that. And I am not exactly sure when he came to America, but he was one of the founders, so it had to be before then. His children were Marion, Rose, Jack, Sarah, and Morris. Morris was my father. He was youngest of the children. He was born in 1910. And so he was the youngest, and he was born in Middletown. And some of the other children were certainly born in Europe before they emigrated. And I can remember going to B'nai Jacob once with my father and my grandfather, and we walked down. Of course, we didn't have a car at that time, so we walked all over.
So that you were born in 1937.
1937.
So that must have been in the 1940s. Your early
Yes.
Of being at the synagogue, and how often did you come as a child?
We didn't come very often because we didn't have a car. And so we had to take a bus to downtown Harrisburg, and then we would transfer to another bus to get to Middletown. And once we got to Middletown, we would walk over the bridge that was beside what was then called Olmsted, and we would walk to my grandparents' house. So it really was an all-day trip, and we didn't do it very often.
It was like a journey back then.
It was a journey.
I'm here with Sandy Cohen, whose great-grandfather, Israel Cohen, along with Israel's brother Albert and Israel's son.
No, Sam was Israel's son. Sam and Albert were brothers.
Okay. All right. And they were part of the group that founded historic B'nai Jacob Synagogue.
Yeah.
Your great-grandfather, Israel Cohen's name, is engraved in stone on the facade in the front of the steps leading up to the front door. When we had the facade and steps refurbished a few years ago, we made sure that that stone with his name on it was transferred to the new structure, and you came and spoke at the rededication. Israel Cohen died in 1921, but do you remember any others talking about the old days when the shul was first founded?
My father spoke about it, and he said that he had a seat up in the front, and this he founded this place.
But your father related some of the stories of the older people to you.
Yeah. I mean, when did we hear them? We heard them at Pesach, at the Seder,
yeah.
or a holiday dinner, things like that.
Yeah.
He would tell stories about more so about who they refer to as the Baba, which was his wife, Israel's wife. Her real name was Esther.
Esther
Cohen, and she was referred to as Mary. I don't know why. Don't ask me why.
I'm Larry Kappenstein, and I'm here with Joel and Deborah Schwartz-Hurwitz. Welcome back to B'nai Jacob Synagogue. Joel, your grandfather, Yoel, helped build the shul and was one of the founders. Can you tell us about him and what he did?
Absolutely. It's a story related by my aunt, the oldest child of Yoel and Ida Hurwitz. And she would tell the story, as Sandy said, around the Seder table. A lot of stories come out around the Seder table.
That was Jane Javits.
Jane Javits, that's Dave Javitz's wife. And
they're with the Giant Company.
Right, he found the Giant.
Right.
And she would tell the story when she was a little girl, 7 years old, 5, 6, 7 years old. My grandfather's job was to, in his horse and buggy, because he was a peddler, he would go to Hummelstown and bring back stone for the building. And she would go there, Ida Hurwitz would give her a sandwich, and she'd climb up on the buckboard and hand her father, Yoel Hurwitz, a sandwich for lunch. And that's what she remembered about the actual building, the construction of the shul. He passed away in 49 or 50. I was born in 52.
And he was named after.
And I'm named after, I'm Yoel, Joel.
Your Hebrew name is Yoel,
yeah.
Same as his, yeah.
But when we sat around the Seder table, they would always talk about him. The sisters, my dad's sisters. They would always talk about him as if he were in the room.
That Seder lasted for over 100 years. In fact, just recently, because of COVID, it sort of slowed down.
Yeah.
But it came up to about 50 people eventually.
Yeah.
All family.
That's
all
great.
family from
Yeah.
UL.
Great tradition. Was it a full Seder or did you abbreviate it?
Oh, no.
It's
It's a Hervet Seder. It was full.
a real Seder,
yeah.
like the 5-hour
Oh,
ones.
yeah. Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Same thing.
My grandfather's, the whole thing was in Hebrew or Yiddish. And my dad took up the tradition. He did it all on Hebrew, every paragraph. And
Who does it now?
me.
I know that Roxanne, in the olden days, until the mid-90s, the synagogue was Orthodox, and the women would sit behind the men or up in the balcony at that time. You probably don't remember any of that, but your grandmother probably was part of that. Your grandmother's name was Bertha, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah, I said that my grandfather was very quiet and my grandmother was not. She was the one that I interacted with the most when we came. She was just such a sweet lady, and I dearly loved her. And my grandfather died, and then my grandmother was left alone, and Stanley Singer's grandmother came to live with my grandmother because both of them were widows.
They get along.
They did not get along. They would fight like cats and dogs. It was an absolute riot.
Yeah. Did they speak Yiddish?
Yeah, but I understood Yiddish, so.
Because you were raised with that in your...
My mother's mother lived with us, so that grandmother spoke Yiddish all the time.
So they were all from the old country,
Yeah,
Eastern
right.
Europe or Russia.
Yeah,
you remember
they were
where they were from?
Lithuania.
Lithuania.
Yeah.
They were all from Lithuania.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
When you were in the shul in 1976, we're talking about?
Right.
Was the shul still separated by a veil in the back back
For
areas?
sure. No question that there was still the balcony upstairs. And there were, it certainly was not a problem to get a minion of people. One of the persons that were there, we got up to the priestly blessing. And I checked to see who was a Cohen at the time. And at the time, only one person volunteered. And I turned around and, to call somebody to Torah, there was only one person. And at that time was Ed Beck. That was Ed's probably first year to be at Penn State in Middletown. And he hadn't been too familiar with giving the priestly blessings, and we walked through it, and he did really well, doing it, and it was great. And now when his son comes to Shul, he had moved, I knew he was a Cohen. When he got called up to Cohen, I said, yeah, for sure, it was, I think it was Ed Beck that was there that year.
Very good, very good. When you were doing the service, was the service still primarily Orthodox, or what was the nature of, what was the kind of service you were doing for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
Yeah, it was Orthodox services.
And Kevin, after a period of time, you became the traditional shofar blower for the High Holy Days. How did that come about? Was that right away, or how did that develop?
As soon as they found out I could blow the shofar, I had a job.
Okay, so from the very beginning.
I think it was this maybe the third time I came. Yes.
Now, this synagogue from 1904 till 1994, a long time, probably 90 years, was Orthodox.
Yes.
And now it's conservative, egalitarian conservative.
Yes.
Which one are you more comfortable in now? How do you feel about that?
So I'm comfortable in any synagogue because I feel that a synagogue, just the word synagogue is really Greek, but Beit Knesset, it's a house of gathering. It's a gathering of people. And therefore, it doesn't matter to me. I feel comfortable whenever there is a Jewish people gathering.
So if we were still Orthodox, you would feel comfortable?
I would feel comfortable.
Okay.
But I love this place because I feel that I can express my Judaism much more. I can go to the bima. I can talk to the members. I can lead a service. I can sit next to my husband.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's pretty amazing.
Big difference, yeah.
Yes.
when we first started coming, I had to sit in the back behind the mechitza, the kind of it was a separation.
The curtain.
Right, the curtain. But on the high holy days, then women and people with small children sat upstairs.
And this was still going on in the 90s when you were there.
Oh, yes.
It was going sometime after Lena Zach's Jake's sister died. Do you remember approximately when it happened?
I think like the second or third time that we came.
This was in the 90s.
In the 90s, right. And Jake decided that it was time to move forward.
And when they had the veil, it was the last two rows, because there are nameplates for some of the older women who attended the shul, including Jake's sister, Lena Zachs, who had a seat at the end of the row. And you recall the veil coming down first, but ending the women and children sitting upstairs for the High Holy Days, taking a few more years.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that the children were restricted to the upstairs, because Jack was very, very good with the children.
You're talking about Jack Rabin.
Jack Rabin. If children came up to him during a service, he was totally fine with that. He just kept on going. He welcomed them up on the bima. But mostly the families sat up there because young children sat with their mothers. Typically, that's just how it was, although they didn't have to.
One of your sons, Harry, was bar mitzvahed in the synagogue. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
So Harry, my wife is not Jewish, so Harry was not raised with religion, but he was playing basketball with a bunch of Jewish kids for the Maccabee games at the JCC, and they were all talking about their bar mitzvah because they were all 12 years old. And Harry said to me, "Dad, can I have a bar mitzvah?" And I said, "Well, you can, but it's going to take a lot of study." And so for the next year, along with Mike Eckstein's help, who was our spiritual leader at the time, and put Harry's bar mitzvah part on tape, I trained Harry how to read or sing his bar mitzvah part, and learn some of the prayers like Olenu and Adon Olam. And in 1 year, phonetically and transliteration, Harry actually did the entire thing, which amazed me because he was only 12 years old at the time. And he was able to study all that and was bar mitzvah here. And we had 175 people invited to his bar mitzvah. Now, as you know, the synagogue does not hold 175 people. So some of the people never even got in the door. They were standing outside. We opened the doors and they heard the service from standing outside.
The reception after.
Oh, yes. The reception was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I want to know about your marriage, because from what I understand, the two of you were married here in 1979. Is that right?
Yep, 3 Mile Island. That was in what, June? And we got married in October 28th, 1979. And we weren't quite sure. Joel belonged to Kesher Israel. It was a huge synagogue, and we were having a smaller wedding. Did we come down here? You showed it to me?
I think so, yeah.
And it smelled like my synagogue from Lancaster, Degal Israel, the old shul. Maybe it was just reminded, but it was the smell. There was a smell here that was a very special
the old wood,
smell.
Maybe, or
it must have been something like that.
Okay.
And it just gave me good vibes, because my grandfather was a big part of my life, and they lived in Lancaster, so we would go to shul with him.
So tell me about the wedding. What, you had a chuppah?
We had a gorgeous chuppah. In fact, you have a picture of it. A beautiful chuppah. It was from Kesher Israel. We had borrowed it, and we had Rabbi Silver, and he was a renowned rabbi in Harrisburg area, probably around the country. And it was a beautiful ceremony. It was small, with about a little over 100 people.
105.
Do you recall any special events at the shul other than High Holy Days, weddings or bar mitzvahs or things like that?
We had the 100th anniversary here, and we had a large attendance of members of the Jewish community, as well as the rabbis and cantors from the other synagogues. Very well attended.
And we also had a 100-year-old Ida Betty Orstein in attendance for that event.
Our longest attending congregant, Ida Betty Prowser Orstein, was born 1 month before the synagogue was chartered in 1904 and attended services until her passing at 101 years old. She was your aunt. Can you tell us something about her and about the scholarship that you helped develop in her name?
Okay. Aunt Ida, or what everyone else called Ida Betty, and my mother, my father and Aunt Ida were brother and sister, and they were very close. But my mother and Aunt Ida were like this. They were so tight, and they were both really strong women. They believed very much. They talked about learning and education for everyone all the time. They were way before women's lib. And Aunt Ida used to talk about how she loved her time in the Middletown school and how she wished she could have completed her years there. She never actually got to finish high school. The scholarship fund, and you helped us with this so much, Larry, was to support students who were graduating from Middletown High School and had really, overcome odds, not unlike what the founders of the Shul had to overcome in their lives. And so this was to help them continue with their education.
Can you say your whole name and your birth date for the camera?
June the 16th, 1904.
And what's your full name?
Well, Ida Bessie Osteen.
Or
Prowser.
You were
Prowser's a maiden name.
And right now, how old are you, Betty?
95, 96. What?
Something like that, right? Is your father one of the original founders of the Shul?
Oh, yeah.
And what was his name?
Prowser.
His first name?
Samuel.
Samuel Prowser. He was one of the original founders of the synagogue.
They had, there was two brothers. One was Shmuel and one was Seaman. Yeah.
Did you keep kosher?
Oh, I'm still kosher.
You're still kosher?
Oh, yeah. I wait 6 hours from meat to dairy and 3 hours from dairy to meat. Oh, yes. I still observe it, and I... Listen, that's the way I was raised, and that's the way...
For 120 years, even without a paid rabbi or cantor, B'nai Jacob Synagogue has been able to maintain staying open and having services at least once a month. What do you see in the future for B'nai Jacob Synagogue?
At minimum, I see the same tradition going forward. At minimum. I think when people in the greater community, and that can go down to Elisabethtown and come up this way and go past Harrisburg, meaning west, realize that this synagogue is so unique, and why so? I think maybe you'll see more attendance, more new faces, hopefully. And I don't see this place disappearing. And hopefully there'll always be at least a minyan.
I certainly will continue to support the synagogue. It's kind of my legacy. And when you look at the stone and you see the guy I was named after on that stone, it's kind of like I have an obligation to at least be part of this, and certainly to make sure the shul continues to stand.
B'nai Jacob was the right place at the right time. I had just started to try to get back into synagogue life, and Elisabeth brought me here, and I felt the same thing that Elisabeth felt. I felt that no questions, I was welcome, it was a beautiful place, people were trying to continue, a very long, beautiful tradition here. On the high holy days, it's often full for one day, either one day of Rosh Hashanah or one day of Yom Kippur, it's full. And the question is, why is it full on those days? Partially it's full on those days because this is a place people can go to when they can't go anywhere else. If they can't afford tickets for another synagogue, or they're in town just for the day, or they're at Penn State and they're students. And one of the things that I tried to do, with the programs that I publish for our services, is to make it as accessible to whoever is here no matter where they are from or, what training they have.
How much Hebrew they speak.
We have
transliterations.
Programs in Hebrew, we have programs in transliteration, programs in English, so that people can participate and be with us in the service. And it helping preserve this wonderful historic place, and also this wonderful welcoming place, and also this place where people can feel they can go to if they have no other place to go, is what keeps me here. You want to do the 4 things or the 3 things?
Yeah, you want to call them off?
Tikia, Shura, Terurim, Tikia Gadula. Thank you.